BBC Choice on Radio 5 Live.
With all the Boxing Day football action, match of the day, here on BBC One in 15 minutes. First on BBC One, the BBC News with Peter Sissons.
A third night of terror for the hostages seized by Kashmiri militants. 160 are still held on the hijacked plane in Afghanistan. Vicious fighting as Russia launches its final assault on the Chechen capital. And the worst storms in memory lash northern Europe and kill more than 50. Good evening. 160 hostages on board a hijacked Indian Airbus are still being held tonight on an airstrip in Afghanistan. Their captors have freed only one more passenger who became ill, and at least one other has been stabbed to death. There are believed to be 6 or 7 hijackers who are demanding the release by India of some Kashmiri separatists. The aircraft, owned by Indian Airlines, is at Kandahar in southern Afghanistan. It was seized on Friday on its way from Kathmandu to Delhi.
On the tarmac and going nowhere, the hijacked airliner at Kandahar. Another person was released today, said to be a gesture of goodwill, but the hijackers have threatened to blow up the plane if anyone approaches it, and the 150 passengers still on board have now begun another night in captivity. The Afghan authorities say they won't tolerate any attempt to end the hijacking by force. They clearly want the aircraft to leave and have offered the hijackers fuel. But according to the crew, an oil leak needs to be repaired before it can take off, and where the plane would go is not clear. At the request of the Indian government, a team from the United Nations has flown in to help, but it's being stressed they're not there to negotiate, a decision that's upset the Afghan authorities. And in Delhi, anger is growing among the relatives of those still held captive. They want to know what the Indian government is doing to resolve the crisis, and they're not happy with the answers being given by ministers. Among those calling for action is the wife of the plane's co-pilot.
I'm very much annoyed with the government till right now. I just can't express my feelings about my husband.
The passengers released by the hijackers in Dubai arrived back at Delhi airport as waiting relatives clamoured for news. This man said he'd been tied up, blindfolded and stabbed. The funeral of the one man known to have been killed by the hijackers has taken place amid emotional scenes that further underline the public pressure on the Indian government to secure the release of the remaining hostages. Peter Gould, BBC News.
The Russians say they've reached the centre of Grozny, the capital of Chechnya. There's fierce fighting in the streets as rebels try to defend the city, where thousands of civilians remain trapped. Russian forces say they've taken the strategically important Minutka Square and claim some groups of rebels have been cut off.
Slowly but surely, the Russian army is edging forwards. Day 2 of the all-out assault on Grozny, and the shelling is incessant. The artillery barrage is targeted on known pockets of rebel resistance. The soldiers move in only once a specific area of the Chechen capital has been pounded. The approaches to the city have been heavily mined, though. Clearing them is a time-consuming business, hampering the Russian advance. Convoys of trucks carry ammunition to the front. We saw vehicle after vehicle on the road today. This is a massive operation. As many as 40,000 civilians in Grozny are now facing serious risks. The months of shelling were bad enough, but this could be far worse. As people shelter in cellars, a Russian minister and a Chechen official have held talks to see what can be done. But any evacuation would require a ceasefire, and that's unlikely to happen. Prayers ring out across Grozny as the Islamic rebels prepare to go into combat. They're inflicting severe losses on the Russian army, determined to keep their dream of independence alive. A captured Russian soldier is paraded before the cameras. The rebels are far from beaten yet.
More reinforcements are heading towards the front line. Russia is sending all the units it can muster into what's becoming a very bloody battle. Jonathan Charles, BBC News on the Chechen border.
The bad weather that that's caused so many problems over the past few days is now affecting France, Switzerland and Germany. France and Germany say they've had the worst storms since records began. More than 50 people across northern Europe have been killed, most of them in accidents caused by falling trees.
Boxing Day in Paris, and the aftermath of the city's worst storms on record. The mayor of Paris wants to declare a natural disaster, and he's called for government help. The winds of more than 100 miles an hour swept across the city and most of northern France. In the capital, thousands of trees have been uprooted and many buildings badly damaged. A number of people were killed and others injured, either by the falling trees or by collapsing walls and chimneys. Airports and railway stations had to be closed, power lines were brought down, and more than 1 million French homes spent the day without electricity. Boxing Day attractions like this circus had to be cancelled, and Euro Disney was closed after 6 visitors were injured. Elsewhere, the gale-force winds brought ashore more of the oil slick that has been threatening the Brittany beaches for 2 weeks. The stormy weather spread the oil further along the coast, killing thousands of seabirds. The storm has also caused havoc and brought several more deaths in Switzerland and Germany. On the roads in Germany, at least 5 people died when trees crushed their cars. In Stuttgart, the gales have wrecked many buildings. Fortunately, in this incident, no one was injured. Forecasters say the wind and the rain will continue across much of Europe overnight. Jane Evans, BBC News.
Hundreds of homes in England will be at risk from flooding for the next few days, according to the Environment Agency. In the southwest, many families and businesses have spent the day clearing up. Many rivers in central and southern England are still on red alert. Neil Hamilton, who lost his libel action against the owner of Harrods, Mohammed Al Fayed, says he'll take legal advice on appealing against the verdict. Defeat has left the former Conservative minister with legal bills of up to £2 million, and he faces financial ruin. Mr. Hamilton says he's confident he can raise the money he needs to appeal. Astronauts on board the American Space Shuttle Discovery are preparing to return to Earth after releasing the newly repaired Hubble telescope back into orbit. They made 3 spacewalks to complete the work. Hubble will now resume its scientific experiments after 6 weeks out of action.
After spending the past week in a unique repair shop 370 miles above the Earth, the Discovery astronauts appear to be on the verge of successfully completing their mission. The telescope's faulty parts have been replaced, and Hubble's Eye on the Universe, which has been closed since November, is ready to open once more. They had one last task: to unlock the clamps which have held the Hubble in place and let the telescope go.
Today we're going to set her free.
The shuttle's robot arm gently lifted the 4-story telescope from the cargo bay and eased it on its way. Afterwards, at a news conference by video link, the clearly elated British-born crew member hoped their success in space could in some way help the Earth they'd temporarily left behind.
I think we're learning as we go into space, especially building the International Space Station, that though we may have big differences culturally between different nations and different peoples, we can work together and achieve great things.
The mission has been something of a rush job, shortened to ensure the Discovery is back on Earth before New Year's Day to avoid any potential Millennium Bug problems. If everything goes as well as is hoped, then the telescope it leaves in space could be sending images back to Earth within a fortnight. John Brain, BBC News.
Now, with news of a steadier day for England's batsmen and the rest of today's sport, here's Sue Thurle.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Well, in the Premiership, Arsenal's title hopes suffered a serious setback with a 3-2 defeat at Coventry. Robbie Keane scored what proved to be the